Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. World Day Against Trafficking in Persons is observed annually on July 30. Now, that date has passed, but we are happy to speak about this subject and the work of the Counter Trafficking Unit with Deputy Director Dane-Marie Marshall. Hi, Ms. Marshall, how you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, and you?
I'm all right, thank you, but I want us to start the conversation from the ground up. So give us a little overview of the Counter Trafficking Unit, please.
The Counter Trafficking Unit is Trinidad and Tobago's response to human trafficking. And this unit is a unit under the Ministry of National Security. It is a unit that is born out of legislation, the Trafficking in Persons Act. And this act was ratified from the Palermo Protocol, UN's protocol. So you see there is root and in relation to the Counter Trafficking Unit.
I'm grateful to continue with the definitions because I think sometimes when people hear human trafficking, they may ask, is that different from migrant smuggling? So make that distinction for me, thank you.
Definitely. So human trafficking, there are components that must be necessary to bring about a case of human trafficking. And we speak about the act, the means, and the purpose. And when we say act, we talk about recruitment, transport, transfer, the harboring of an individual. And that must be accompanied by means, being whether or not it was forced by deception, persuasion, coercion, even the abuse of one's vulnerability. And that added to the purpose. If it was sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, domestic servitude, and other things that might come under the umbrella of exploitation. So when those mechanisms take place, we see human trafficking. Important to note, human trafficking could take place within the limits of a country. So it's not necessary to really move across a border for a trafficking situation. And we could say from the very first trafficking conviction Trinidad and Tobago has recorded, it was a trafficking situation that happened within the confines of our Twin Island state. Smuggling is generally the legal entry of persons within the borders of any country. So illegal smuggling would be the movement of persons outside of our jurisdiction, inside, not having entered through any lawful borders control system. So you didn't pass through the airport, or as I generally ask persons, did you see an immigration officer when you arrived? And that is one of the key components to determining whether or not somebody actually entered our borders illegally.
Looking at the fact that there are misconceptions, there are areas that can be cleared up a little bit. What are some of those issues, myths, misconceptions that come to mind that you normally need to treat with when you hear the term human trafficking?
Immediately, one must always believe that a trafficking victim must be somebody that is a migrant. We are not discounting the fact that the migrant community holds a significant number of our trafficking victims. But again, if we refer to the very first conviction we've recorded, that victim was a Trinidad and Tobago national. So we really want Trinidad and Tobago to understand that our children are also susceptible, to a trafficking situation, because we believe here as this directorate, led by, I should mention, Mr. Alan Miguel, that vulnerability is a key component of what really constructs a trafficking situation.
What are some of those things or some of those factors that would increase the level of vulnerability?
We are seeing a massive exodus of persons moving out of Venezuela. So in that, we are seeing that migration and possible illegal smuggling situations. We recognize that when somebody enters an area that is unknown to them, they are vulnerable. So we go back to the whole vulnerability. So what we are seeing now is that movement, which of course engages in a significant amount of vulnerability at this time. now renders persons in a position where they are preyed upon by predators who really and truly are focused on trafficking networks and that criminal element of trafficking in persons.
Like the fact that you spoke to trafficking may happen within the confines of a jurisdiction, within borders. You don't have to cross a border. Are there things that may increase the level of vulnerability within, as opposed to saying, okay, well, there have been individuals who are migrants or illegal or otherwise, but for people within borders, are there things that increase the level of vulnerability as well? Because I'm thinking of the potential for, because we're in Java, as the Java period, July, August vacation period, and people not in school, mommy and daddy or guardian going to work because people need to get it to have it. What are some of those other things that come into play that may increase levels of vulnerability?
So just as you said it, right? The UN, in commemorating World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, their theme this year was Leave No Child Behind in the Fight Against Trafficking. And we are now looking at the comparative of our children being recruited in trafficking situations via social media platforms and networks. In the Java, where we have found parents using the babysitter of our TV and our social media devices, huh? So you get what I'm saying, right? We are now going in a place where we want to inform parents that that might not just be the best approach. That in itself is a vulnerability. You're actually exposing your child to the possibility of somebody recruiting them via those platforms. So we recognize, even quite recently, we had a meeting and training with members of the media, and we spoke about even something as the newspaper, seeing recruiting situations that might happen in the classifieds. So even at a point where a parent says, all right, take away social media platforms and read a newspaper, we recognize that there are recruitment mechanisms within the confines of even that. So it's a matter of us educating and really engaging levels of public awareness with our young people. And we believe that is what will bridge the gap through the platform of prevention of this offense.
Speaking of prevention, and we're just moving from vulnerabilities to some of the successes of the unit, thank you. Because I think sometimes people may feel it's all doom and gloom. You spoke about a conviction already. What are some of the success stories that the unit would have experienced already?
Every day, the unit goes out and conducts an exercise and we rescue one person. That's a success story. We see that as a success story. Once we are able, through the mechanisms of our hotline 800 4CTU, and we get reports coming in, and we are at a place where we are able to really drive home to the public and the public understanding where we at in relation to instituting and ensuring that we are able to meet at every instance of a possible trafficking situation. We could go out there and rescue persons. So our rescue is a success story. Quite recently, we also had an engagement of a spoken word competition in commemoration of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and just seeing our young people having done significant research and coming out there and really putting together some pieces. That for me was a success story, because we are now at a place where we recognize that our young people understand and are willing to tell the story about trafficking situations in Trinidad and Tobago.
And I'm grateful that we are at that place. We're also at a place where we need to take a short break. We continue speaking with the Deputy Director of the Counter Trafficking Unit, Ms. Dane-Marie Marshall. When we return, stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with the Deputy Director of the Counter Trafficking Unit, Ms. Dane-Marie Marshall. Just before we took the break, we were talking about what defines success, because I think sometimes people look for big, gaudy numbers as opposed to looking for every single life that is affected is a success. But
Yes.
the matter of that success, though, what happens after? I'm not asking for specifics, but when someone is rescued, when someone is taken from the clutches of their would-be trafficker, what are some of those incremental steps that are taken with that individual?
The Counter Trafficking Unit also has a legal obligation to protect victims of trafficking, and that is a legislative responsibility. And this responsibility is shouldered with significant partners. So we ensure once an individual is deemed a victim of trafficking, they go through a series of psychosocial assessments, and we make sure that they reach the point where they can deliver in a recording of a statement for prosecution. But we focus on the victim. It is a victim-centered approach in the conduct of any trafficking situation as we move forward towards a prosecution. The Counter Trafficking Unit and by extension, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is responsible for food, for shelter, for the safety of a victim of trafficking. And we have a significant shelter stock, and that we use generally to ensure that our victims are secured within the process of the investigation and even after. And of course, we partner with significant NGOs, the International Organization for Migration, the Pan American Development Fund, and these areas, Families in Action. It's so much to mention, so I don't want anybody to feel up. But we recognize all of y'all, and together we are able to really treat with the victim to make them whole again. This is a very traumatic experience. Being a victim of trafficking it is a lifetime trauma, right? So what happens is that we ensure that they are given the necessary care, psychosocial, social, health, physical, you name it. Once it is required under law, we would be able to facilitate.
In terms of some of the work that you do with partnering agencies, and like you said, too numerous at this point in time, you want to make sure that you don't forget anyone. But is there outreach work or outreach programs happening? Because I can imagine the potential for someone to be looking and saying, was that activity going on there? I know sometimes people say if you see something, say something. But is there outreach activities to let people know how they can help the unit? And also, is there something like hotlines that people can reach out and say, okay, well, I'm not sure what this is, but it doesn't seem to be above board. How do people interact with the unit?
Yeah, definitely. The Counter Trafficking Unit understands the importance of public awareness, and is actually a mandatory function here at the Counter Trafficking Unit. The authorized officers and of course the directorate, we move through Trinidad and Tobago, whether physically or virtually, and have conversations with persons once it's requested. We are actually at a point where we are now pre-planning our 16 days of activism and how we intend to progress that come November, December. And we will be engaged in Tobago very soon. So Tobago, we're coming to you. And this in itself would really allow for us to have an avenue or mechanism that we could really reach out to persons. If you look very hard through Port of Spain, we have a bus running, and that was sponsored by the UNDP. You look on the highway as you proceed east after the first flyover, and then Valsane, we had a billboard sponsored by the Interclub. And as you move west, we have another billboard sponsored by the UNDP. So we are in conduct of an engagement with persons, and you can contact us at the Counter Trafficking Unit via our social media platforms if you so desire us to come and have a conversation with your group, with your entity. And we can also really significantly say to you that 800 4CTU is a protected hotline. Call us, let us know, identify it, and report it to us.
What do you mean by protected hotline?
Anonymous hotline.
Okay.
So only officers who are vetted and polygraphed from this unit would answer that hotline.
I'm glad to hear that, because I think sometimes people say, well, if I snitch, will I be victimized? People will say, is them who tell on all you?
Let's not get into those conversations here.
I hear you. So you spoke about the theme with regard to World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. What were some of the activities, the itemized activities that would have taken place?
We had a plethora of activities. I mentioned some. I spoke about the spoken word. We had an engagement with the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, the Ministry of Education, the International Organization for Migration, UNICEF, and we went to the secondary schools and we said to them, come with your spoken word. We use the vehicle of arts and culture because I feel as Trinidadians, we understand that language. We understand the language of the spoken word, which is really the foundations of our calypso. And then we move into the direction of an art gala where we had called for artists to come and bring your pieces that would really depict Leave No Child Behind. And I'm going to say, I want to thank the Art Society of Trinidad and Tobago for partnering with us, Mille Fleurs under the Ministry of Tourism, and of course, the International Organization of Migration. And together, this team, we put together an art gala, and there was a continuation of an exhibition that was at Mille Fleurs between the 30th of July and the 1st of August. So those were some of the activities we had, coupled with, of course, we had engagements with the media, public awareness engagements, and we unveiled the billboards and our bus in Trinidad and bus soon in Tobago.
I love the fact that you keep on saying, okay, well, Tobago, we come in because, you know, Tobago has been. And
yes.
And looking at the fact that you are forecasting activities, if there's a community grouping, be it NGO, CBO, whatever sort of organization, and they want to build a capacity in terms of recognizing some of the signs, recognizing how they can help reduce levels of vulnerability, and they want to reach out to the Counter Trafficking Unit, how do they do that, Ms. Marshall?
You could call us at 627-1339, 627-1339, or send us an email on countertraffickingunit@mns.gov.tt. I say that again. Send us an email at countertraffickingunit@mns.gov.tt.
Thank you so much for that. And one, thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for sharing the time, Ms. Dane-Marie Marshall, the Deputy Director of the Counter Trafficking Unit. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.